below. Also, for anyone interested, the author of this series, James Caligo, has compressed all 7 stories into a single book. The Elder Earth Anthology Book 1 is now available on Amazon and can also be found in the description. Feel free to pick up a copy and support an incredible author. Now, let's delve into the dark together. Case file number 3. Date, June 18th, 2021. There's something about Auburndale that I genuinely feel confused about. Despite it being such an obscure town in southern Illinois, I never would have expected it to draw any more attention than attracting people who have nowhere else to go, or would-be thrill-seekers thinking they could take on the horrors of the woods. Cusham is merely the tip of the iceberg to something far bigger than both of us. Or he's merely a puzzle piece in a much grander picture that I need to figure out how to piece together before it tries to kill me and Samantha. It has been about a month now, and she was still staying with me. I wasn't going to kick her out, but I wondered if she had some sort of plan in place. Although initially things seemed calm, upon getting back to Earth, she shows signs of a severe case of PTSD. The trauma that she had gone through in that other dimension has left her aloof and cold towards others, even me to a lesser degree. Trust me, I tried introducing her to the townsfolk. While I found this sad, it's not like I had any experience on how to deal with teenagers. I wasn't her father, but I was her guardian. Although I'd say more of roommates was a more accurate word. Still, she insists on me not doing her laundry. I respected that, and gave her an allowance to get by on. After a particularly restless night of dreaming about my arm having that deadly wound again, I woke up and got ready for the day. When I came out of my room, I saw that she was sitting at the table picking at some eggs that she had cooked up. "Looks good," I said. She looked up at me through her pink-rimmed glasses. "Thanks. I hadn't cooked in so long, I was afraid I was going to forget everything." "That's good. We can get you to take cooking classes, and you can learn something that might help you in the future." She looked up at me, her eyes worn out and restrictive of whatever it was that was trapped behind them. "Or not. Whatever you want." I retracted my statement. Things weren't easy between us. It didn't have to be, and it wasn't like a fight was going to break out. But she was unresponsive to anything that I suggested when I wanted her to get her life together so that we could move past whatever it was. Don't get me wrong, I care about her, but I don't want her to become totally reliant. Seeing that this conversation was going nowhere, I ate my breakfast, told her I was going to work, and proceeded to take my leave. Working at the construction sites to build or repair farms was a job that paid well, but it wasn't a regular thing due to COVID lockdown. Still, my mind kept drifting off, thinking about what I should do next. I needed to figure out a game plan on how to get her to open up and get her life back on track. The longer you waste time lamenting about why things are so bad, the harder it is to get everything you want. But then again, I don't have much room to talk. I lost my house, wife, and a brother. I wonder what they're up to right now. Once the workday was over, I came home and immediately was greeted by Samantha holding papers up to my face. She looked hysterical. "Henry, we need to go." I pushed the paper away and chuckled. "Well, I'm glad to see you're a little more energetic, but I'm not moving for the 4th time in 2 years. "No, you don't understand. We have to get out of here." She had this terrified look in her eyes that I could only say was an inconceivable fear that had overtaken her rationality. "And why is that?" I questioned. She was hyperventilating, and I moved her over to the couch across from the door. Living in a trailer has both pros and cons. It's cheap, all the rooms are close by, and thankfully, this one had 2 bedrooms. Sam, tell me what's wrong. When she finally got her breathing under control for a brief moment, she said, I like to look up radio signals. You know, something to pass the time and listen to on whatever police, military, or information from hermits in the woods have to say. But I decided to check on an old frequency that I remember from my time back in Warmire. It was them talking about coming here. I looked at her funny and asked her to elaborate further. I need more information than that. I don't know much about them. I just know that there were a few survivors of them that were in my city when they disappeared. They kept everyone trapped inside the city before it was transported, and they knew that something was going to happen. They're the reason everyone's lives fell apart. Who is they, Samantha? This time I ordered her. She held on to her heart with both of her arms. Her eyes looked around frantically. They're called Protectorate, and they're coming here. That could only mean something bad is approaching. It's the Aurora Borealis. I'm sure of it. She had told me about how her city was caught under an unusual appearance of the Northern Lights. They stretched down so far that they were able to teleport the entire city. I never heard of her city, yet I went there too, and it didn't affect me. As my theory goes, because we came back before I went there, maybe due to a time anomaly, if you're still on Earth at the time of being pulled into another dimension, you still register in everyone's minds because you never left. Samantha wasn't so fortunate. But who is Protectorate? I've never seen them before. It was late at night still, but I decided to gear up and go down into the forest preserve. Samantha was pleading with me for us to leave, but I told her to look outside and tell me if there were any northern lights. Thankfully, there wasn't. She calmed down, but she was still convinced that something bad was going to happen here. Note to self, don't take her up north anytime soon. Whoever this organization is, she equates them to something terrible. They must be exceptionally important, but unless they're here to kill Cusham, I don't think it's going to be anything that I should be worried about. As much as I and our favorite monster are concerned, they'd have to burn down his entire forest before they can actually kill him, and take care of every carcass that he has. I decided to go see if I could speak with him. He still has been avoiding me, but this time I was going to have a little company with me. Samantha had never met him, but I told her about my encounter. She wanted to meet him herself. Surprising, but I guess she wanted to see what he was exactly. When we arrived at the cliff edge, I looked through the forest to see if I could spot those blue lights. About a minute passed until I realized that he wasn't anywhere to be found. Weird. He's usually always watching me from a distance whenever I get close. Samantha raised her eyebrows at me and said, "Are you sure you weren't taking hallucinogenic drugs?" I sarcastically laughed and started the descent down, her following behind and looking nervous about going into the woods at twilight. Neither of us spoke a word when we reached the bottom, but I felt that usual tension and rotten smell in the air. This was Samantha's first time, so she was exceptionally sensitive to the rancid odor. We went deeper into the trees, my mission being to reach the center. I knew that giant rock is still here, and that seems like a good spot to get his attention. I felt like since he helped me with my arm problem, and even though we already repaid a debt to each other, I thought it would be worth some form of gratitude for healing me to warn him about the incoming danger. When we got to the gigantic boulder, I started calling out his name. Samantha circled around for a bit, still appearing uninterested in my calls, until she heard the sounds of bones crunching and realigning from behind me.
Henry, behind you.
I wasn't worried about this. It's not the first time he's snuck up behind me. Turning around and keeping up a serious expression, he looked down at me with those same furious blue eyes.
And why are you calling for me?
He made sure to stand right over me, as close as possible to intimidate. But I was carrying a handgun just in case. Can't be taking any chances. I came to tell you Samantha thinks that some organization's coming to get you. At least, that's what I think. She just said they're coming here. I pointed to her.
Who's Samantha? And what are you talking about?
I don't know why, but I felt amused at seeing him confused. For once, I had answers that he needed, and perhaps that was the only thing that's keeping us alive at that moment. Some military group called Protectorate is coming here. Apparently, they showed up once when our entire city got pulled into another dimension. He walked towards her slowly, with his hands relaxed. I thought that was odd, considering that he always appeared to be ready for a fight at any given moment.
You confuse me, child. You smell so unnatural, and give me a feeling of familiarity.
Her face looked nervous, but she almost stretched her hand out to touch his leather-covered arm. I quickly got between her and him. Yeah, she was trapped in another realm. We were able to get back thanks to a nexus point. He snarled at me when I mentioned that last part.
What do you know about them?
Whoa, no hostilities, please. I've just been reading about them on the deep web.
Humans shouldn't know about them. But I guess it doesn't matter. You've already gotten yourself so deep into this world, I wouldn't be surprised at you finding yourself becoming a primordial at the end.
He sadistically laughed. I raised an eyebrow, wondering exactly what he meant, but before we could even continue this almost pointless conversation, I heard something. Wait, do any of you hear that? All three of us remained quiet as we heard the sound of loud engines approaching the edge of the cliff. There were also helicopter blades that were cutting through the air. It would appear that our uninvited guests have arrived. All right, first things first. We need to hide somewhere, I cautioned. Cusham melted into a pile of dead bones and flesh without even attempting to help us hide. Just great. It didn't matter anyway. I knew where there were some caves nearby, but I certainly wouldn't want to be caught in one. I've heard stories from army vets talking about how they blew up entrances to trap their enemies inside. We ran as fast as we could toward the closest cave that I could remember. When we got there, Samantha was reluctant to go in. I had to practically push her to get her to keep moving in. Stop whining. You don't want to be seen by those guys, do you? I yelled. It's dark. It's musty. I don't want to get my clothes dirty. I've had these since Warmire. I'll wash them. No, you will not. Frustrated, I pushed her in. We stayed close to the entrance, watching as flashing lights danced through the trees, going in every direction. We thought that we would be safe because it seemed like they were moving a little closer to the center part. Perhaps they were here for Cusham. But we had to be extra quiet because 3 soldiers happened to walk right by us, thankfully not taking notice. One of them said, "So, you boys ready for another one of those things?" The one closest to him on the right said, "Dude, I wasn't ready to fight the one back in 2012. And the worst part was, it was only some civilian that got the killing shot on it." Well, that was a long time ago. And I don't know why you're so salty about that. We did most of the work on that case. You two, cut the chatter. We have about 15 to 20 minutes before that thing arrives. We have to stage a defense line to make sure that it's cut off and can't reach the town. They've already begun evacuations. Roger that. And, sorry, sir. His friend nudged his shoulder against him. Come.
Earn your degree faster at Purdue University Global. With over 175 online programs, there's one for you. Start today with a 3-week risk-free trial. Apply.
Don't take it personally, rookie.
All we have to do is keep the thing from getting out. We can be back to base enjoying our victory cake.
He chuckled. The private replied.
Okay. Hey, has anybody noticed there's a lot of dead bodies around here? Like, I can see them piled up in all kinds of places. Don't know. Don't care. Let's move.
The 3 soldiers moved out of the area, and it was just the 2 of us again. Well, I'm starting to get the feeling they're not here for Cusham. Suddenly, his voice crept up behind us.
I'm inclined to agree.
Both of us jumped back and nearly screamed loud enough to be heard, but I quickly grabbed Samantha by the mouth to prevent her.
Cusham, don't do that,
I said with a repressed shout. This time he did get me. Right now he was in his beaver, raccoon, and grizzly attached duck wings body.
I can't help it. I have to hide as well, and I figured I'd stick close to you for now.
Us? Why us? You can hide anywhere.
Caves hide my heat signature. I give off a lot of that.
That was fair enough. Samantha ended up asking a question. Wait, how are you able to control dead bodies? What are you made of? He grumbled to her question, but surprisingly answered.
Light cells. And I leave the nervous system intact in all my body puppets. But not every primordial prefers dead bodies as I do.
She crouched down lower and kept staring at the blue lights coming from his eyes. I was even a little weirded out by her interest in him, but I guess I can't judge her. This is probably the first time a monster hasn't tried to eat her. Although I'm certain he would if circumstances allowed. For the last 15 minutes, we've been hiding in this cave. The air is stale and rancid due to Cusham, but no one is brave enough to make a run for the cliff and get back home. I'm bored, Samantha whined. Too bad, I said. We aren't gonna risk getting shot at. Yeah, but... She looked at the back of the cave. Can't we go further into the cave? Weren't you worried about your clothes? I retorted. She replied, It's actually not as dirty as I thought. I didn't really mind as long as she didn't go outside, but to my surprise, Cusham interrupted.
No, it's best not to get curious in dark places.
All I could think of was how ominous that sounded, and now he was making me a little curious too. But that would have to wait, because the air started to crackle with a loud boom.
Anyone else hear that?
I asked. All 3 of us crouched lower to the ground, but moved closer to the exit to look up at the sky. There was a bright light that was streaking closer to the ground, traveling at an insane speed like a falling star. It was just about upon us until it struck with a cataclysmic impact that sent a gigantic ripple through the ground and made all of us collectively fear that the cave was going to collapse on us. Cusham would probably survive, but if it did fall, it's lights out for me and Samantha. The shaking was brief, and the loud explosion was quickly able to dissipate past us. I stood up a little, taking a look outside to get a better view, and saw at least a few more of those soldiers' lights moving in towards the impact zone. I think they're leaving. We can make our escape, I said. Samantha got on her feet, and the 2 of us were just about to take off running for the pathway back up the cliff, but she pulled on my shirt when she looked back at Cusham. What about him? What about him? I thought, but instead said, He knows how to survive. I'm sure it's fine. She removed her hands and approached him and spoke softly. Want to come hide with us at our house? I really didn't want his rotting corpse in my house again. I already lost my last house because of this monster, and the last thing I need is for his stink to ruin the new carpets. I live in a beautiful vintage 1950s trailer house. They don't make those anymore.
Oh, I'm sure Henry here would appreciate seeing me inside his home again.
He couldn't smile, but I'm certain he was. I gave him a thorough frown, letting him know that I really didn't. But Samantha said again, "We're supposed to help those in need." She turned towards me. "And I let you stay in my home. Now I ask that you let him stay in ours." This girl has no idea how close this creature nearly killed me. Plus, she lives with me now, so frankly, she has no room to make this request. But I could hear those soldiers getting close again, so I wasn't about to spend all day debating about this. I told her to bring him, and we both started off back to the path. She grabbed hold of his ugly, rotten self and piggybacked him. I don't think he was expecting that either, and I'm sure if it wasn't for the fact that the head was an entire skull, he'd be blushing from embarrassment. Still, it wasn't going to be an easy trip back to home base. We saw that the pathway up the cliff had one guard who was walking back up the same way as we needed to go. I reached into my pocket and grabbed my brass knuckles. Crouching low to the ground, I stealthily approached him from behind and tapped his shoulder. I moved in the other direction so as to confuse him when he looked. He turned again to the other direction, where I swiftly gave him a quick punch to the face. He winced from the impact, and I proceeded to punch him a few more times in the face to make sure he was definitely knocked out. I was still practicing. I grabbed his radio, knowing full well that you want to have information of what's going on in order to survive. He didn't seem to be carrying any heavy weapons on him, just a Desert Eagle. But I already have one myself. "We need to keep moving," Samantha whispered to me. "I know." When we reached the top, I heard an insane amount of chatter breaking over the comms. Then, a sudden barrage of gunfire and explosives started illuminating the woods behind us. They had started engagement with whatever it was that had crash-landed. Cusham watched with a somber look as he saw his home being set ablaze by this military group. I tugged on Samantha's shirt and said, "Come on, we need to get back to the trailer." And so we left the forest to be scorched by whatever purposes that were being conducted. I was going to have to learn why they would go to such lengths, and how far it would escalate. I was the first one inside and immediately sat down at the table where I started listening in on their conversations. There was too much screaming, as if everyone was panicked, and I found it hard to distinguish any particular person talking. Samantha had dragged Cusham to her room to do who knows what. I wasn't particularly concerned, and I was sure that no harm was going to come to her. Though he better not leave any of that brown slime anywhere. I am not getting an infection again. Finally, after a few moments, I heard the voice of someone who was coordinating the attack.
"The target is moving erratically through the woods. It's also larger than the previous one and has a different base form. New hostile. I repeat, a new hostile."
Another soldier sharply interrupted.
"Tanks and anti-armor personnel are having difficulty in this forest. Helicopter flamethrowers are ineffective as it moves too fast to the trees. We'll need to resort to large-scale bombing."
I listened intently for anything else to respond to what he was insisting upon. I didn't want my town to be destroyed.
"Negative, Staff Sergeant. We cannot proceed with large-scale attacks until military personnel have been evacuated to a safety zone. Target is not stationary."
I slumped back in my chair, relieved that they weren't going to resort to that. At least, not yet. I decided, though, that I needed to check on Samantha and Cusham. I went to the door, and when I opened it, I saw that she was in the middle of painting him on one of her many canvases. He was sitting on her bed, practically staring daggers at me when I walked through. "Having fun in here?" I asked with a wide smile. She looked back at me happily, something that genuinely took me by surprise. She had been so gloomy for so long. She must really enjoy this freak's company. "Yeah," she said, joyfully. I finally have something else to draw about besides gloomy cities covered in slime. I scratched my head, not really wanting to be concerned about her art projects because there were much bigger things to worry about. But if it makes her happy, I won't stand in the way. Well, we might have to pack up some things and head out of town for a while. This seems to be a little bigger than what we can handle. She looked upset, but it was Cusham who spoke harshly.
I am not leaving my forest.
Suit yourself. I'm not holding you back, but I'm not about to die for this place.
Oh, we both know that's not true. You've been wanting to catch other monsters for some time, and I already know that you have a different reason. You just want me to lose my home.
I thought to myself, thought hard about whether or not that's true. He's the biggest pain for me, but I also kind of don't want to deal with big creatures without his assistance. Even though he comes off as big and tough, considering that I've already seen that there are primordials stronger than him, I figured he'd still be good enough to deal with them if we came at them as a team. But he's not one for team play. Cusham. Suddenly, 3 sharp knocks came at the door. All 3 of us looked at each other, and quickly we grabbed our weapons. I grabbed my shotgun, Samantha her 9mm with a laser pointer, and, well, Cusham is his own weapon. When I got to the door, I hesitated, but another few sharp knocks came, and a man's voice on the other side said, "Open up. I know you're in there." If it was just one of the soldiers, it should be safe. I put my gun down and opened the door. Samantha and Cusham retreated back into her room. "Evening, sir. Are you aware that there was an evacuation order?" I looked at him, nervous about what to say next. I wasn't. I'd just gotten back home after going to the nearby woods. He had a black face mask, so it was hard to tell how he was emoting. "Down the cliffs." I had to lie. No. I was by the railway a little further south of here. It's not too much of a walk back. I did notice that the streets seemed a little quieter, except for all the, I nodded towards the sound of gunfire and explosions happening towards the local forest preserve. He seemed to understand what I was saying, and said, "Well, that's the issue going on. You need to evacuate now. Mind if I come in? Make sure you pack what you need." Sure. I don't mind." I did mind. I did not want this guy to find out about Cusham. He looked around my double-wide trailer, checking out all the things that I had collected over the past few months. "You best start packing, buddy. At some point we're going to have to start authorizing harsher orders." He said that so nonchalantly, but for me it was no big deal. I wasn't about to let this guy hurt Samantha or me, and when I walked over to my room, he followed after. "So, who are you guys? And who are you fighting?" I asked. "Not important. Just hurry up," he ordered. I noticed that he was starting to grow curious about Samantha's door. When he wasn't looking, I quickly grabbed my taser strike light. "Is there someone in this room?" he asked, appearing to already go for the doorknob. Yeah, my daughter," I said, slowly turning around. He opened the door right as I was coming up behind him and saw Samantha try to stuff Cusham into her large backpack. "What in God's name is that?" he shouted, getting ready to pull out his M16. Without a second to lose, I shoved my taser into his neck and pressed the button, sending a horrifying jolt of electricity through his body. He dropped like a fly, and his body was twitching all over. "Well, I'm guessing we're gonna have to tie him up now," I said. Samantha nodded in agreement, and Cusham quickly tried to climb out of the backpack. He was not too thrilled that she tried to do that. The poor sap was in the middle of our living room. When he started stirring, his eyes flickered back open, and once again he started screaming the moment he saw Cusham. Whoa, chill, man. He's probably not gonna hurt you.
Alien space creatures I'm used to, but that's just a dead corpse.
Cusham approached on all fours and said,
We don't have time to deal with your panicking. Either you tell us what's in the woods right now, or I'm going to wear your body next.
Sam and I had the same look on our face. For the military guy, I assume he thinks that that's going to be quite painful. In actuality, Cusham always kills his prey first. The guy took a few deep breaths before saying,
Okay, I'll tell you what I know. I'm just a private anyway, so I don't expect much.
We leaned in closer.
Yesterday, one of our satellites near the moon got a signal that one of those metallic orbs was coming back to Earth.
Back? I asked.
Yeah, this isn't the first time they've come to Earth. Anyway, we were mobilizing at a moment's notice, and we saw that it was coming to this town in particular. It wasn't just some random shot in the dark like they always were before, but it was specifically aiming for this area.
I wondered why a UFO aimed for this spot.
Honestly, this isn't even my first time dealing with this type of alien. They tried to kill me and my ex-wife back in 2012.
Oh, you're a divorcee, like me, I said in surprise.
Listen, I'm just trying to save people. You gotta get out of here, quick.
Samantha chimed in.
We can't. This is where he lives.
She pointed at Cusham. The soldier looked at him, and then back at us. And why should any of us care about whatever that thing is? I spoke up.
He's an ally. Besides, he'll probably need us to deal with the alien.
He stared at all three of us and had this look of disbelief, but I didn't care about his opinion of me. Besides, how tough could this alien be? But at that moment, there was a sudden shaking that was getting worse with every passing second, like the sound of gigantic footsteps approaching us. Cusham whispered,
Oh, that doesn't sound like an easy kill.
There was a brief few seconds of quiet, and in that moment, I looked at Samantha. Her eyes met mine. And then, that's when the entire trailer began to shake violently. The flurry of bullets was ripping holes through the walls and ceiling, and all of us tried to get as low to the ground as we could. Then, the trailer started to tip. We were being flipped by whatever it was outside, and I quickly had to reach out to Samantha. Cusham dug his sloth-like claws into the floor, but after another roll, he was thrown away along with the soldier to be buried in the wreckage. What felt like an endless spiral of eternity was actually a few minutes of trying not to get killed by any of my silverware. I tried again to grab her. Our hands briefly connected before I got thrown away. When the next flip came, I jumped towards her and reached out further, grabbing hold of her palm. I pulled her close, and she held on tight as we were hoping that whatever it was would stop. We were constantly being tossed around, but I was able to get a brief look out one of the windows. It was trying to roll the trailer off the cliff. I knew for a fact that we wouldn't survive the fall, so I had to think as quickly as I could during one of the brief moments where it tried to regain its grip on the house. I looked for my shotgun, seeing it lie on the ground in the middle of the living room. I released myself from Samantha and jumped towards it quickly before we went for another roll. I'm so glad I leave these guns lying around. Just when it was about to start up again, I grabbed hold of the weapon and held on tight. I tumbled with the house as it flipped once more and then briefly stopped again. Now was my chance. I looked through any of my windows to see if I could find the alien, but I realized it was on the side of the floor. Not knowing where to shoot, I took aim and started blasting holes through the wooden flooring, hoping to hit whatever it was that was on the other side. After about 5 shots, I heard a thunderous roaring. I was just about to cheer, thinking that I had heard it,
only for the floor to start splitting open as two large hands spread them out. Uh-oh. I felt suddenly petrified. The floor was torn completely open, and the creature that was staring at me was an ugly-looking monstrosity. It had a hulking gorilla body with an extended neck, orange, feathery hair on its back, and its face was nothing like any animal that I could relate to other than having a noticeably large lower jaw and bloodshot, completely alien eyes. The creature was looking at me with the ferocity of killer intent, but with my quick thinking, I shot another spray of bullets into its face as it was trying to intimidate me. I thought I got it for good this time, but I guess this creature isn't like primordials. That only seems to piss it off more. It shook his head like I was nothing more than spraying water in its face, but as it was about to climb in and start tearing us all limb from limb, a hail of armor-piercing bullets began raining down on the creature, and it let out a tremendous, animalistic call in defiance of whoever it was that dared to shoot at it. Samantha and Cusham came out from the rubble, and I quickly reached out to them. Then I stopped to look around for the soldier, but he was out cold. I wasn't able to drag him around. I figured the creature was gone, and it wasn't going to come back, so he'd be fine. Probably. Or we were going to have to find a new place to hide. We ran out to the dark, empty road nearby and tried to get back to town as quickly as possible. Now we were unable to hear anything that was going on, and I would have to rely on Cusham to warn us. I didn't have many bullets left either, and we were going to have to make a stop at a nearby house. When we went up to the front door, I wanted to knock on it, but I remembered that they already evacuated everyone. Breaking the door down was simple enough, and we were able to rest up. I sat in an armchair while the other two rested on the couches. Well, I'm homeless again, I remarked dishearteningly. We're homeless, Samantha said, trying to lighten the mood. I could hear the sound of distant explosions nearby, but I was way too exhausted to investigate. If they're going to blow us up, I'd rather be asleep for it. And shortly after that, I did fall asleep. My body was so sore that even resting on an armchair felt like a cloud. Sometime later, the sounds of screaming interrupted my dreamless slumber. I still felt pain all over my body, but I forced myself out of the chair and saw that Samantha was missing. Same with Cusham. I limped over to the front door and looked outside. My heart was racing. Every horrible thought that you could think of was crossing my mind. Despite not reloading, I grabbed my shotgun and went out to look for her. I saw a pickup truck and decided to try out hot wiring a car. I learned a bit after my Warmire incident. After about 3 tries, I was successful and started driving around. I traveled a little further down the road, wondering where those two could have gone, and frantically preparing myself for a confrontation with either the alien or Protectorate forces. But I stepped hard on the brakes when I spotted Cusham on a large rock by the side of the road. "Hey, where's Samantha?" He looked at me with his beaming eyes and said,
She heard something outside and went to investigate. I followed after, but 3 armored guys grabbed her and drove her into the town.
Got it.
I let out an impatient tone.
You coming?
No, I'm not. I don't care about her or you.
Really? Because she seemed to care about you for whatever reason. She even put up with your horrendous smell.
I shouted back. Angrily, he punched the ground with his sloth-like arm and furiously responded.
Don't try guilt-tripping me, human. I owe you nothing.
After what she did to protect you, you're gonna leave her like this? She's probably the only human who genuinely was interested in you, and you're just gonna turn your back on her.
We stared at each other for a few long seconds. I thought maybe something with Samantha had gotten to him, making him see that humans aren't just this infestation that he sees them as. But I had to go get her. I was wasting my time with him anyway. I rolled up the window and drove on into town, leaving the coward in my rearview mirror. I was going to have to abandon the truck when I got close to the entrance. There were still military vehicles everywhere, and I couldn't risk getting caught. If anything, they likely had drones that were already watching me. Well, here goes nothing. I stepped out of the vehicle and ran for the closest building, a barber shop. When I looked inside, it was empty, and I broke the window to get in. Going into the back, I found myself in an alleyway and had to traverse through the dirty, garbage-filled back area to try and get towards the city hall. I came to an opening and saw a dumpster at the end. Hiding behind it, 3 tanks made a complete stop just in front of me. I thought maybe they had spotted me, but they appeared to be taking a defensive position. Then, I heard her voice. I peeked out and saw Samantha being dragged along by one of the soldiers. "Miss, you need to go to the evacuation zone," he said sharply. She kept squirming from his grasp, replying, "I don't have to go anywhere with you." They kept fighting about this until someone who I assumed was a higher-up approached both of them and said with a deep coldness,
Where was she?
He replied,
By the cliff. We saw that a mobile home was destroyed close by, but we only found one of our boys inside. He had to be taken to a recovery station."
He looked at her with callousness. "Well, if she doesn't want to go, just shoot her. Any civilians caught inside our area of operation needs to be disposed of as of now."
But, sir, she's just a kid.
Doesn't matter. There's a million of them around the world. We won't miss one who didn't want to adhere to the rules. He quickly turned around and spoke to his radio, repeating his orders for that soldier to the rest listening in. I wasn't about to let them kill her. Right at that moment, I jumped out from my hiding space, but was quickly interrupted by a tremendous roaring bursting through the sky. The tanks were suddenly springing to life, and the soldier with Samantha quickly tried to run to my side of the road. I looked up at the church at the end of the street and saw a gigantic monster hanging from the steeple. It jumped down, sending a ground-shaking thump, and started running towards the tanks. They opened fire, shooting whatever rounds of ammunition they had, and despite taking each of their armor-piercing rounds and explosives, its skin was regenerating. A dozen soldiers were coming out with their rifles, firing as many rounds as they could alongside the tanks and 2 Black Hawks that were flying overhead, firing flames down onto the creature. Now was my best time to get Samantha. I ran towards her, and with the soldier that was guarding her releasing his grip, I grabbed hold of her other arm, and at first she was going to fight until she saw that it was me. "Run!" I shouted in haste. We turned and ran past all the soldiers who were too busy on the alien. It stormed towards the tanks, and much to my sheer shock, it flipped 2 of them on their sides, looked up towards one of the Black Hawks, and shot out an appendage from its mouth, latching onto the helicopter, swinging its head back and forth so that it could disrupt the copter and cause it to start spiraling out of control. Both me and Samantha were trying to avoid the hail of bullets raining down everywhere. It was insanely chaotic, and I got distracted by the 3rd tank that was chunked into the air over our heads as if it were a crumpled piece of paper. This abomination had an ungodly amount of strength. We ducked low for a moment, trying to avoid shrapnel pieces, when the Black Hawk finally collided with the ground, sending a shockwave from its explosion and separating me from Samantha. I was tossed to the farthest end and immediately went into shock. Looking around, panic-stricken, I was able to look through my slightly fuzzy vision and spot her, lying motionless about 15 feet away from me. When I tried to get up, I felt something crack in my leg.
It didn't feel broken, but I'm smart enough to know something was definitely fractured. I refused to lie there. I forced myself with as much strength as I had to get back up to reach her. I couldn't leave her alone. I crawled inch by inch. Every thought that passed through my mind was just a little closer. There were still bullets passing by me. I guess I tried my luck for too long. A sudden bite through my shoulder managed to throw me back onto the ground.